Hello and welcome to the 9 News Business Buzz, where we take up what's happening in business, how it impacts you and our economy. I'm your host, 9 News business expert Ryan Frazier. I'm joined by Ed Seelover of the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and the editor of the Sum and Substance. Ed, it's good to be back with you talking business. How's it going?
It's going well, Ryan. It's going busy. TSScolorado.com. I'll show exactly how busy it is.
Let's get into some of these busy topics you and I have been talking through. Our first topic is a major new report that could fundamentally change how Colorado regulates some of its biggest industries. The Department of Regulatory Affairs, DORA, has just released its annual sunset report on the Public Utilities Commission, recommending 23 changes that could have big impacts from everyone from Xcel Energy to Uber and Lyft if you use those services, which many of us do. Ed, your article in the Sum and Substance was all over this. A sunset report that sounds bureaucratic, but these 23 recommendations touch on two critical areas for Coloradans: utility bills and safety ride-sharing apps. Let's start with the ride-share piece. Now, these transportation network companies, as they're called, DORA is recommending mandatory facial recognition technology to stop driver impersonation, requiring public safety reports, and making it easier for the PUC to fine these companies that refuse, these drivers that refused riders. Break this down further.
Well, Ryan, this conversation goes back to earlier this year at the legislative session. People may remember that one of the representatives, Jenny Wilford, introduced a bill that would kind of overhauled some of the safety measures for TNCs because Representative Wilford had been sexually assaulted in a TNC. That bill went through, but Governor Polis ultimately vetoed it, saying, I think the things you are asking are going to make it very hard for these companies to operate in the state of Colorado. But one of the things he included in his veto note was a directive to the PUC, look at what we can do that doesn't jeopardize Uber and Lyft riding here in the state. And this is where some of these ideas come from. For example, the use of facial recognition technology is something that could have prevented, theoretically, what happened to Representative Wilford because there was driver impersonation in that. That's something that wasn't actually discussed for much of the bill. It's something that could be coming back right now. Some of these other areas are just things that really oversee the companies and their safety measures.
You know, you look at these regulations that are forthcoming, or these changes in this case, and you say, you know, is a legislative solution or regulation necessarily the right solution? Has there been any discussion down at the Capitol on alternatives to this?
No, I mean, right now, this is kind of a first shot, if you will. And the companies have both kind of taken a step back and said, not this is good, this is bad, but we're really looking at this and how this would affect us and how we could work with the state on this. I think there is going to be some pushback here. For example, one of these things that we're talking about is demanding increased fines around rider refusals. Now, right now, we don't really know how often rider refusals happen. That's one of the other aspects of this, is they're looking for more transparency in these reports, so people themselves can see how often is it that a company says, no, I'm not going to pick you up. But the idea of increasing fines for that is something that never sits well with businesses who are trying to abide by the law.
Yeah, now the other half of all this is utilities, arguably a very big half. It's a major focus for I know the Chamber. One of the biggest recommendations is to allow the PUC to use securitization. Let's say that again, securitization, more often to limit those massive, sudden customer bill increases that we've all been frustrated by. Ed, can you break that down, and how would this securitization tool actually work, and what does it mean for a utility like Xcel, and more importantly, for the average customer's monthly bill?
Now, right now, when an Xcel or a Black Hills or another utility has to do massive infrastructure improvements, that may be growing the system, that may be putting in more electrical lines to, say, accommodate the increasing use of EVs and other forms of electricity that the state is pushing really hard for. What they typically do, Ryan, is that they reflect that in the customer's bill. They raise their base rate. That allows them over a number of years to kind of make up for the cost they have to put into this infrastructure. Securitization is an alternative method of financing where instead of putting it into a base rate, you go out to a third party and you sell revenue bonds, and that's going to keep it on the rate a little bit less long. Utilities are worried about this sometimes because if you're going to be putting in infrastructure that's going to last theoretically forever, you want to be able to recover that cost forever. Customers are saying, look, we need a way to avoid some of these spikes that you're talking about when you're putting in this new infrastructure. Securitization is one of those ways, and this would actually recommend the PUC could say to utilities, guess what, you will use securitization on this, not putting it on a base rate. rates.
Yeah, so this isn't just about bills. It's also about energy transition. The report also recommends requiring utilities to offer that third-party program for EV charging installations and allowing smaller utilities to appeal to the PUC if local governments deny their infrastructure projects. This sounds like an effort to increase competition and speed up energy transition. What could this mean for Colorado's energy future?
Let me take the second part of that, Ryan, because it's a really small but interesting recommendation. If you are allowing local utilities to appeal local government's decisions to the PUC, what that means is this. Right now, a utility, if they want to, say, boost transmission lines, they're going to have to run them through a lot of land. And a lot of local governments are saying, we don't like this. We're hearing from landowners, we're hearing from people around. This is not where we want to see transmission lines run. And that has kind of stopped some of or slowed some of the electrification efforts that we see going on right now. If this would allow them to go straight to the PUC and say, actually, I think this should be approved, potentially overriding local government, one, we're going to create new fights with local governments, as we've already seen over the housing issue. But two, it could actually speed up this electrification if folks know they have a second option if the local governments don't allow this.
Yeah, now, Ed, there's a lot still to happen here. Let's talk a little bit about what's the next step. And this report now goes to the state legislature for the 2026 session, right? And which of these battles, the rideshare, safety rules, or the utility financing charges, do you expect to be the most intense at the Capitol?
Yeah, what happens now is that they're going to have to get a bill passed in the legislature to continue the PUC. That's kind of a no-brainer. I think everyone wants to continue the PUC. However, this bill is going to contain any of these recommendations, and it's also going to contain recommendations that may not be in here. Legislators may have some ideas. Outside groups, particularly environmental groups, may have some ideas too about how they would like to see changes made to the PUC. So this, I think, is going to be one of the most stringently debated bills in the upcoming legislative session, just because it has the opportunity for everybody who has an interest in changing some level of PUC recommendation to throw that into this bill. We could see a lot of discussion about what happens next. I expect it'll be introduced in the first month of the legislature, which begins on January 14th, but maybe not passed until the closing weeks of the legislature.
So you think a pretty heated fight?
I expect so. I think people are really going to debate, what does this do for our electrification? What does this do for utility bills? All of these things that we talked about.
Ed, we need to run. This is clearly a major potential overhaul of the Public Utilities Commission with significant implications for consumers and major industries. The Business Buzz is back during the 11 a.m. hour, where we will unpack a new effort by the College Board to fix the workforce skills pipeline, starting with high schools. For the 9 News Business Buzz, for Ed Seelover, I'm Ryan Frazier. Until next time.